We're going to get started. I would love to start with some prayer. Of course, is it okay if we get going? Okay, awesome. So let's start with some prayer. Lord, we thank you so much for this day, God. We thank you for bringing us together. Lord, we just desire that you would have your way in this place, Lord. We want you to speak, and we just want our hearts to be open to receive from you. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Awesome. I think everybody has a neighbor that they can turn and look at. If you can just turn to somebody near you and say 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. 7 out of 10. That is how many millennials leave the church. 7 out of 10 millennials leave the church, and that makes 70%, right? For me, in doing some of the research and preparing for this session, that was a statistic that was staggering to me. For me, it was one that made me think that's something that I should care about, that as a body of Christ we should care about, because certainly it's a number that Jesus cares about, amen? Mm-hmm. I think about the fact that, we know that Jesus is willing to leave the 99 to go after the 1, right? He cares about the 1%, 1 out of 100. Mm-hmm. Smart, right? Thinking, doing our math. So we know that he has to care about a 70% that's walking away. And so the title or the focus of this particular session is Why Millennials Leave the Church. And a good place to start is to define millennials. I don't know about you guys, but it's kind of, this cool term that maybe we hear often. People are always talking about, there's always this buzz about millennials. And I needed to get some things clear for myself. What actually constitutes as a millennial? So our definition we're going to be using for the sake of this discussion is that millennials are, that term is referring to a generation of people born between the years 1981 to 2001. A generation of people born between the years of 1981 to 2001. And so we can say that millennials are generally those who we would consider to be young adults, right? We're talking about ages 18 to 38. And I will say, for any of my friends in here, if I have any friends who are like over their 30s, mid-30s, leaning toward the later 30s, I feel like that should be encouraging, because you still fall within this like cool title. So you can feel encouraged if that helps anybody. I can't talk myself, because if you ask me, I'll tell you I feel like I'm getting old. So millennials are what we would consider to be young adults. And when we're talking about why this lesson even matters in the first place, right? I was asked to speak on ways to reach and minister to millennials. And we're going to get to that in this session as well as the next session. But the reason why this session is titled Why Millennials Leave the Church is because we're seeing so many young adults stray from their church homes and even from their faith altogether. It's a matter of once they come of age, right? Whether it's us becoming adults and feeling like we can make our own decisions, or whether it's us moving out of our parents' homes officially and we're off on our own, or because we're going off to college. We're seeing young adults who grew up in church and considered themselves to be a part of the church in their younger years, that they are now largely making the decision to no longer associate with the local church body. So I thought it made sense to first consider the question of why millennials are leaving the church as a precursor to discussing how to reach them. Because understanding why they're leaving in the first place is going to help us to better understand how to minister to their needs. Amen? Mm-hmm. So the millennial generation, right, this buzzword or buzz phrase, it's been the focus of much conversation, much study, and even debate within our culture. There are actually more millennials in our nation than there are any other age group or bracket of people. Therefore, they've garnered much attention. Now, mind you, I am a millennial myself, but I will be using they as opposed to we, so that any negative things that are associated with millennials, you won't necessarily have to put me or anybody else in this room in that pot. So I would just say they, okay? So So they've garnered a lot of attention, right? You consider the fact that because they're such a large group, because they're just because of sheer numbers, they have this great power and influence, and many have put effort into seeking to understand this particular generation, right? Marketing experts understand that millennials have a lot of buying power. So they've put this focus into trying to figure out how they can brand their products to appeal to the millennial consumer. Politicians have learned that there's a great deal of voting power that this generation holds, and so they've sought to create campaigns that are going to draw this age group in. And so the nature of that attention that this age group has received, it's been split between both positive and negative. People have had all these things to say. People want to figure out this generation, and there have been differing views. It will lead a person to wonder, is this generation a blessing or a curse? And so before we get into some of the characterizations of the millennial generation, I would like to ask you all a question. I am a teacher, and I hear my voice enough. In fact, I hate to talk too much. And so you will find that I'm going to allow you all to speak and offer your thoughts as much as possible. So I do have a question for you all to get us started. I just want to know, what are some ways that you characterize millennials or have heard this generation be characterized? What are some ways that you characterize millennials or have heard this generation be characterized?
Positive or negative or both?
Both, whatever comes to mind.
Lack of commitment.
Lack of commitment.
I think probably not wanting to submit to any kind of authority.
Okay, good.
Tolerant.
Tolerant. Thank you. Got something from the positive side.
Very concerned about social issues.
Say again.
Social issues, concerned about social issues.
Concerned about social
Making
issues.
a difference, they want to make a difference.
Yes, certainly.
I also hear that they're selfish. I've heard that.
Selfish. Good. He had to balance that out. Give us positive, throw something negative out there. I'm not mad at that. Awesome. So we've heard plenty, right? There's so much to say about what could characterize an age group, and obviously we understand that you can't take people of a certain age bracket and throw them in one box and say they're all the same. But we can definitely look at generation from generation and see that there are some general traits that are unique to that particular age bracket. And so we're going to start looking at, first of all, some positive characterizations of millennials. We've already heard that some of the things that are said are definitely relevant. Some of the things we're hearing in media, some of the things that maybe as millennials we can identify in ourselves or identify in others. And then we'll also look at some of the more negative things as well. So those bullet points under your positive characterization. The first bullet point there is that I have is that millennials are innovative.
Mm-hmm.
It is just, it's within them to want to tweak and tinker at things, right? There's an inclination to be trailblazers, to find solutions to problems both big and small. And this is actually seen merely in the fact that this is the most entrepreneurial-minded generation ever. Surveys of millennials have shown that a great majority have goals of starting their own businesses, and it would explain why we're kind of like in this startup frenzy, right? We're in this startup generation where people are just taking nothing, right, and creating something, and it's grassroots, and you're seeing businesses and things like that pop up everywhere. Second bullet point is that millennials want to lead. Many young adults are hungry for a chance to show and develop their leadership skills. They want to be trusted with responsibility. They want work that is meaningful. They want to feel like they have a significant role in the things that they're doing. Third, millennials are passionate. This is a generation that tends to dream big. They'll take risks, and they're willing to restlessly seek for open doors to see that their big dreams come to pass. So we have millennials are innovative, they want to lead, they're passionate, and fourth, millennials are civic oriented. This generation has a strong sense of community both on a local and global scale. Compared to previous generations, millennials tend to focus not just on individual needs, but on societal needs. And these are some of the things that we've heard, right? Them being concerned with social issues, them being concerned about their community and the world at large. Millennials value education. The millennial generation is on track to being the most educated generation in Western history. Educational achievement in getting a college education is considered to be a big factor in achieving success in life for this group of young people. And I did want to add one bullet point there. Hopefully that doesn't throw some people off, because you'll find that with these notes, we're going to give and take some. So go with me. But another bullet point I want to put there for positive characterization, just for good measure, so you guys know how wonderful of a generation we are, is that we're tech savvy, right? This is the first generation to grow up constantly connected to the world. Pew Research Center labeled millennials as digital natives in a land of digital immigrants. Millennials clearly adapt faster to computer and internet services because they have always had them, right? And even if this, I mean, you've got in that range, in that age group, you've had people literally who have, since they were born, internet, cell phones, all that was a booming thing. That's not the case for me, but for most of my life, right? That has been the case. And so we have those positive characterizations there. Let's look at some of the negative things that we hear about millennials. And part of the reason why we're doing this is because it helps to understand the people that you're trying to reach, right? To understand what it is that makes them who they are, what it is that people think about them. So some negative characterizations, we heard this one, is that people tend to think that millennials are self-absorbed. Millennials have been thought of as the driving force behind this, I'll say, dreadful selfie culture that we live in. And so it is commonly thought this generation is one that is self-involved, all about me. In fact, you can look up things on millennials and you'll find that a nickname for the generation is the me generation, right? It's all about me. Secondly, they are thought to be unrealistic. I mentioned before in the positive characterization that they're dreamers, they're big thinkers. Well, a byproduct of that is that they often are perceived as being unrealistic in their goals and aspirations, that they're kind of pie in the sky, they're, doing too much, basically, right? And so their big ideas can be received as over the top and unachievable. And while if you ask a millennial, they will say this is a good thing because we're going for something bigger. But you have older generations that will say, no, but you need to come back down and be more practical, right? Thirdly, millennials are thought to be unreliable and, as we heard, lacking commitment. Unreliable and lacking commitment. This generation has, on average, waited longer to engage in long-term commitments, such as moving out of their parents' home, getting married, buying their own house. They also tend to bounce from job to job. I was having that conversation with somebody yesterday. And so these tendencies have led people to negatively label millennials as lacking commitment and dependability. And the job to job one I think is pretty interesting, because if you ask a millennial why they've held, like there's a statistic about the average amount of jobs that they've held in a certain amount of time, they would tell you it's because, as opposed to the traditional thinking of, oh, let me stay rooted in this place and be there for years and retire from this one place and be loyal, what we consider to be company loyalty. A millennial thinks in the terms of, I want to always be doing something that is purposeful, that is going to allow me to grow. And so once I feel like I fulfill my purpose in one place, I want to move on to that next thing that's going to allow me to grow more. And so that was just some insight that I thought was interesting. That next bullet point there is that millennials are thought to be wasteful. One way in particular that millennials are seen as wasteful is financially. This generation will spend big, especially on new technologies. Studies say that millennials are addicted to instant gratification. They view new gadgets as needs as opposed to wants. I found this to be, also true. Again, I don't want to nag on millennials too much, but there have just been times where I'm like, man, you can't even afford to pay me gas money yet. you found a way to buy that Apple Watch. I wasn't pointing at you. That looked like that. But, okay, no Apple Watch anyway, so no worries. But I do find it interesting that there is such a necessity for the new gadgets and the technology that there's even a willingness to spend what you really don't have to get that. And the last bullet point there is stressed out. There have been studies that have found that this generation is more stressed out than previous generations, with money, work, and the cost of housing being the main sources of stress. So I wanted to look at some of those characteristics because I know that it helps us to understand better who millennials are. And it also helps us to have a better idea of who it is that we're ministering to, or even maybe how to minister to them in some ways. I mentioned at the very beginning a statistic that Lifeway Research found, which is that 7 out of 10 millennials are leaving the church. I can definitely say in my own experience, right, growing up in church, that there are so many of my friends, so many people that were my age, I grew up with, that when I go back home to Michigan or I look at social media, I find that these are young adults that are no longer in the church. Or they consider themselves still to be Christian, but they feel like they don't want to live out their Christianity the way that they were raised to, or the way that their parents or grandparents have chosen to live out their faith. And I believe many of us in this room can think of people in that same boat. And so we must ask the question, what is causing this mass exodus, right? What reasons do millennials feel that they have to leave the church that they once identified with? So again, wanted to throw a question out to you guys before we get into some of these statistics. Why do you all think millennials are leaving the church?
That's why I'm here.
To learn? Okay.
I think maybe if you don't use them, you lose them.
If you don't use them, you lose
They
them.
want to be leaders and they want to innovate and they're passionate.
Oh, I like that. See, using the points we're talking about.
Could
Yes,
you repeat that
student.
so we can hear her?
Yes. So the point that Alyssa made is that there's the idea of if you don't use them, you will lose them. So she was drawing on the factors that we talked about, how millennials are innovative. They want to be leaders. They want to feel like they're doing purposeful things. And so if they feel like they're not being used in the church, then they feel like, what's the point of me being here? I feel like I'm just useless, or I'm taking up space. Yes.
Can I add something along that line? Because I'm trying to learn here. I don't want to think I'm trying to tell you what to do. But
No, certainly.
I'm learning. Seems like there, I think it could be positive or negative. That's probably why you don't have it on here. They can be so extreme. You know, they go extreme. Sometimes the church don't go extreme with them. You know, they want to give it all to God, or not give nothing to God.
Mm-hmm.
You know, they go extreme, and so we're trying to go to the middle line so we can reach everybody, not just the millennials.
Mm-hmm.
So do you think that's one of the reasons we're maybe not extreme?
You know, that is a really good point. And I think it actually kind of connects to a little bit of the big thinking, big dreaming, and how I was saying that a negative byproduct of that is that the millennial can be looked at as, you're doing too much, you're going too far, right? This is unrealistic. And so I think that there is much to be said about finding balance and finding a happy medium. I think the biggest thing could be the approach, right? And honestly, I think there are several facets to that, because I even think about, I almost would like to ask you for a specific example. As I think about a lot of different ways that I've seen millennials want to be more involved in the church, and how that could be taken to an extreme, in ways that you would want to kind of say, oh, we can't go that far. However, I've also seen it where I think as saints, as leaders, if we approach it in a way to say, you know what, perhaps we can't do that, we can't go 100% on that. But first of all, let me start in encouraging or being thankful, showing you that I'm glad that you even have this idea. I want to appreciate the fact that you're coming to the table and showing me that you want to be involved, right? First of all, just fostering that, encouraging that, and showing that young person that they're actually valued goes a long way. Because then that way, even if you can't go the 100% or whatever idea they have, at least they know, okay, it's not because, what I'm saying isn't valued, or I'm being looked at as the child who needs to sit down, or, that I'm going to a church that isn't wanting to move progressively and things like. I know progressive is a buzzword. But if we first of all take the time to acknowledge we value your opinion, we thank you for your involvement, and then let's talk about ways that we can do some of what you're wanting to do. Perhaps not all at once, but let's see how much we can work with. And you're still keeping that person involved, right, in the thinking process, right? We might not be able to do a Facebook Live every service. I don't know why that one came to mind. It's a tech thing. I personally, I feel a little strange about, recording in church all the time. That's just me. Don't shoot me. But maybe we can't do Facebook Live, but hey, let's start with an Instagram page. Something like where we can just we can take pictures and we can post some things.
Isn't that where you lose them though, when you try to pull them back, and unless they're, which they're not all the time, they want to lead rather than listen.
I think
they don't want to be pulled back. They want to. Let me give you an example, like the Me Too movement. I mean, some of the things the Me Too movement's good, I think, because abuse women, and stuff like that's wrong. It definitely should be corrected. We can't go around hanging everybody, that's
Certainly.
accused of doing something.
Certainly. I think, and we're actually going to get to that social involvement. So that one I'm going to put a bookmark there. But I will say that one of the things we're going to find in one of our points, and one of the things I found in my research, is that while millennials can be looked at as they don't want to listen, they want to do things their way, that's really not the sentiment. When research was done and when actual millennials were surveyed for themselves, what was found was that there wasn't really a matter of millennials not being willing to listen, but they were more so desiring for those who are older than them to be willing to lovingly mentor them and show them the way, right? So what they're feeling like, we're being shut down. But if the approach is taken that, I'm going to listen to what you have to say, I'm going to listen in love, I'm going to celebrate you and uplift you, and let's talk together lovingly, right? I'm not demeaning you or coming down hard on you, but I want you to help me along the way, even if we can't go the 100% way, right? So I really think it's all about approach, doing it in love, and allowing them to recognize that you're investing in them, that they're being allowed to be mentored and grown into these leaders that they want to be, that you're helping to cultivate them so that they can continue to give those ideas and eventually come to a common ground where you're seeing their perspective and they're seeing yours. But I think a lot of times, honestly, I'm not speaking for you or for an older generation or anything, but I think sometimes because we don't understand all of what millennials, if we want to call them that, or younger people are concerned about. We don't understand all their passions. We don't understand all their ideas. They're coming with technology and all these innovations, and we can feel like, I don't want to lose control here. I have no idea about a Facebook Live. I have no idea about some of these social, things that are coming up, and it can cause us to get very tight. And what we project sometimes, I believe, is what they take as stern and anger and shut it down. And it's really just a fear or a wanting to keep control because we don't want things to spin out of control, when really we can just kind of be more intentional to be loving and understanding. I just said a lot, and I hope that helps. And I hope that nobody just felt like that was a bunch of rambling. But hopefully that is helpful. And as we go, if you want to have a sidebar, or if your question wasn't answered by the end of it, we can talk about it more. Okay.
Good job.
Okay. Praise God. Sorry, I just got away there. But so the question of why do we think millennials are leaving the church? So we had a really great response. You don't use them, you lose them. So let's go through some of this. I think I have like a top 9 or 10. Number 1, 68% of millennials said that when they were surveyed, they said that church feels fake and Christians seem bored, right? Again, don't associate me with any of these responses, guys. But what they're saying is that so much of what they're experiencing in church feels like people are just checking a box, right? Services are programmatic. You got the going through the motions, and it's the right time to clap and the right time to shout. And it seems so much like a by-the-book robotic thing. Number 2, 66% of millennials said that church feels exclusive and judgmental. The sentiment there is that not everyone is welcome. People get torn down instead of built up. Number 3, millennials feel that churches should be more civically engaged. There's a survey done, this was by Barna Research, and they found that millennials felt, again to the civically engaged point, that the church doesn't care about their community. 47% of young practicing Christians thought that their church should be more involved in fighting extreme poverty. What is more, 45% of the respondents said that they would give more to their church if they were more involved with poverty alleviation. So young people are looking at the church and they're saying, what is your cause? What is it that there's all these things going on in the world, and what is it that the church has to say about it? Number 4, millennials feel that current day Christianity seems aggressive and focused on an agenda. The thought there is that evangelism seems to be very in your face and pushy. Number 5, millennials feel that there is a lack of transparency and vulnerability from church leadership.
Transparency and vulnerability.
Yes, from church leadership. They feel that when it comes to church, the saints and the leaders seem to be wearing masks, that they're not relatable. Number 6, this generation feels that their parents and older generations don't live out their faith sacrificially. We must remember that millennials are people who want to be a part of something bigger, and they're willing to go to great lengths for a cause. And so they feel that they're looking at their parents and they're looking at older Christians, and what they're seeing is that there's this faith that doesn't cost anything. They're seeing a faith that is convenient to the believer. And in their mind, when you have a true cause to stand for, it should cost you something. You should be willing to lay down everything for it.
That's great.
Yes, sir. Number 7, millennials feel that parents and older generations value holiness in their hearts, but in their words and actions, they show forth and produce legalism. Number 8, millennials feel that they receive a lot of criticism and not enough coaching. And so that was kind of what I was getting at, Pastor, about, millennials hear a lot of what they're doing wrong, but they want somebody to show them the right way, and not in just the quick and easy, or the right way is just, no, don't do that. Well, no, teach me, show me the way, take me under your wing, and invest in me some skills, invest in me some wisdom, some understanding.
Right.
And from that, we get relationship, which is when somebody, and I want to bring this up later, maybe in the next session, but people don't want to know, they don't care how much you know, they want to know how much you care. And so if all of our young people feel is that they're just getting the up, sit down, up, be quiet, well really, if there's that relationship there, they'll be able to receive a caution sign from you. When they recognize, oh, this person cares about me, oh, they actually are about my well-being, then when you throw up the yellow light, they don't take it as a red light. They recognize that you're just trying to be cautious as opposed to telling them, stop, no, this is, you have no part. And then I got number 9, I'm going to add number 10. Number 9 is millennials feel that there's a lack of an acknowledgement and appreciation for the good things that they do, right? So we recognize there's a lot of differences between millennials and the generation before, but their desire is that, hey, everything we're doing isn't bad. How about recognizing some of the good things that we're doing? And then I did add a number 10 on there. Millennials feel that the church ignores big issues. Millennials have questions about big issues, and unlike older generations, they don't accept everything a Christian has to say simply because you quote the Bible. Right? We're talking about an educated generation here. We talk about that. This is the most educated generation. And so, I mean, when you're talking about people who they've got these degrees and they're aspiring to, have this knowledge and understanding, well, now you have people who are thinking. I recognize that there's, a double-edged sword there. But what we have to recognize is that, gone are the days where you could just say, oh, that's just the way it is, or, oh, well, because the scripture says that. Well, they're wanting deeper understanding. They're wanting to be able to not just say, I believe this because my pastor said or because that's what my grandmother believed, but they want to believe it and know it for themselves. And so they have these big questions, and one of the part of the survey was that they were asked to select an image that best represented present-day Christianity. A majority of millennials chose an image of a Bible with a person pointing the finger at someone. Instead of seeing a table open for everyone to discuss, to talk about God and work out their faith, what millennials see is an imposing finger-pointing Christian who is ignoring their questions and telling them to fall in line. And so they're having these questions and they feel like the church avoids answering them and that it tries to give simple answers more often than not. So I do want to take a pause there because I have been talking for a little bit and I want to give you guys a chance to talk. So what we're going to do is just for maybe a minute or two, I would love for you to consider these 10 points that we've gone over, right? This is what has caused millennials to leave the church. And I want us to be thinking about, because we're going to talk about it together, how as the church, how can we respond to these things? If this is what millennials are thinking at large about us as Christians, about the church, then what can we be doing differently? How can we be responding to some of their thoughts? And what you're going to do is you're going to turn to someone near you, and you guys are going to discuss this together. What can the church be doing to respond? And I'll give us just a couple minutes for that. If you feel like you don't want to talk to the person sitting next to you, you can always go across the room. But talking, it's good for us. It's going to happen. Wow. So I was encouraged to hear that there seemed like there were some vibrant conversations going on. And just maybe if very briefly and quickly, if anybody wants to share something that stuck out in your particular conversation, we want to keep it brief as possible, but anybody want to share maybe 1 or 2 comments on something that you discussed within your group?
Me and Brother Stain were just talking about, I think there is a fine line that goes down this age range. And that line being that there are millennials who do want to know right and who do want to live right? And then there's another side where they are very anti-everything, you know? And why? Because it's being pumped through our culture, being pumped through media. I mean, Brother State was mentioning that it's being taught in schools, you know? And just kind of going back with some of the social issues that were mentioned previously. So, but I think there is some there. I wouldn't cast all the millennials into the same pot, because I feel that there are some that you know do stand for morality, and although there is the other side that doesn't. So I mean that just kind of goes back to the good versus evil. Where that's going to be here until God takes us home. We're always going to have to fight that. One thing that triggered me when you said no coaching. What I was expressing is that I think to alleviate that need, it all goes back, and I've been hearing it so much around our movement, it goes back to discipleship. And I think if we had more disciple-making moments, then that would appease the generation who's looking for that mentor, that guidance.
Certainly.
And it would give them the direction that they need for life. So just simply, and I mean, it goes back to our general session with, Brother Cornwell today too. I mean, Bible studies, discipleship. It's all, I could be wrong, but I feel like discipleship and Bible studies are together. It's the same thing. You're creating a disciple. So if they want coaching, if they want that, I mean, like you said, it's not going to be a 30-minute Bible study. It's going to be, a couple of years. And we just have to be able to accommodate that.
Certainly. I love that. I love that what we find there is really a major thing to reaching this generation is something biblical, right? Discipleship. It's not something unheard of, right? And we know how it works. We're not ever looking to pull rabbits out of the hat and think of some new invention. But I will say when we're talking about this generation, I mean, generally, we are all affected by the day and age that we live in, regardless of whether we're a millennial or not. And I think one thing that we find everybody could probably say that we're running short on these days is time, it seems. And so we have this generation that needs our time. They need our investment, right? We got to be willing to put in that, day in, day out. We're not just doing a quick little hello at church or, a 20-minute Bible study here and maybe there. But what it really requires is an investment of our time and energy and efforts. And it's difficult because we live in a busy world, and a lot of times we feel like I just don't have that to give. However, it's the Bible way. Mm-hmm. And so I even found in my own personal life is, finding what that looks like, because it seems so foreign in this culture. What does it really look like to invest in a person in that way, to disciple a person to that extent? And we find that was how there were such great results in the Bible. We find that was how Jesus was so effective. And I saw a hand go up over here. Do we have a quick, yes?
Just piggybacking onto discipleship, like it doesn't always have to be teaching them like the word and biblical concepts, but you first have to cultivate that relationship with them.
Certainly.
If you don't have that relationship with them, then they know that you don't care for them, they're not going to listen to a word that you have to say. So until you physically cultivate that relationship where they can then take the time to hear you out, that's kind of like they're into their feelings very much.
Definitely. We have feelings over here. Yes, Angela, did you
Yeah, just real quick, and I still do this today, but when I was a youth pastor, because time is so precious, if I had to pick things up for youth or set things up, I would always pick up young people with me and take them to Walmart with me and then have them come set up the youth room. And that was bonding with time, them asking me questions, then learning how to be a servant, then learning how to set up something, tear down something, clean, it was discipling them, but also, making my life a lot easier at the same time.
Yes. I've found too that car rides are some of the best times to just have some personal time with a quality time with another person. And that was something I used to have a focus group, a small group with young girls at our church. and it was like, you know, at the end of the night, you're ready to just go home and tell your mama to pick you up. But it's like, oh, sure, I'll take you home. And while we're going home and going from place to place, let's all talk. But it makes a world of difference, right? And I mean, you're going to be in your car anyway. Why not have somebody along with you if you can, right? Really good points. So we're going to get into some of these points of how the church can respond. And obviously, you guys are already having conversations about some things that you're thinking of already. And so I'm just going to give you some of the things that I came up with and that I found in some of my research. But that first bullet point there, millennials are looking for the real, right? They want something real. It's not just for millennials' sakes, but as the church, we must seek to live out our faith beyond going through the motions, beyond maintaining traditions and the status quo. This generation senses that there are a lot of Christians coming to church simply because that's what they were told to do, right? And they're saying, the pushback they're giving is that no more. We're not in that day anymore. I understand my mom went to church because her parents had to go to church. But if I come to church and I feel like there isn't that real connection, if I feel like there isn't that authenticity, if I see that what's being preached about in church is not being lived out, then I'm going to be automatically turned off, right? And so the key here, I didn't say the key first. The whole thing is about being real, but the key the way I worded this is that for this bullet point, key number one, be authentic in the spirit. If millennials are looking for something real, well, how do we give them something real? By being authentic in the spirit. What do I mean by that? I mean that when the church is truly spirit-led, there's no time to be boring and fake, right? Because the guiding of his spirit is going to allow for man's agenda to be shaken up. So whatever program we're used to doing on Sundays when we're led by the Spirit and we're used to singing our 3 worship songs and everything's dead and nobody's doing anything, well, a Spirit-led church isn't just going to keep singing the same 3 songs where everybody sits there like, no, somebody's going to be led to do something. Let's have a prayer meeting. Let's break some of these chains. Let's do something that's not going to be according to the status quo. That doesn't sound like boring church to me, right? Yeah. When we're spirit-led, we're going to start seeing people's every needs being met. That people are going to come in, whether it's with physical ailments, whether it's because they're emotionally distraught, they're broken. We're going to see that people are going to come to church, and in a spirit-led church where the Spirit is given freedom to reign and to rule and to move, people's needs are going to be met. That's not boring church. Right. The third thing, and the list goes on, but the third thing as well is that we're going to start seeing operating of spiritual gifts. Right? That's one thing I hear from millennials all the time is, okay, you're showing me this Bible where there are all these signs and wonders and miracles. I don't see that in the church that I go to now. In the Spirit-led church, we're going to see those signs. We're going to see the miraculous. We're going to see the prophesying and the tongues and interpretation. We're going to see people being healed. We're going to see the gift of faith in operation. And so key number 1 is to be authentic in the Spirit. Key number 2, be authentic in love. This generation feels that the church only opens its arms and its doors to certain people. As the body of Christ, they're looking for us to genuinely love and receive all people. We must be a church that welcomes the person with pink hair, a church that welcomes the person that has piercings and tattoos all over. We must be a church that welcomes those who walk through our doors and they reek of smoke and alcohol. We must welcome the homosexual. We must welcome the homeless person who comes in with a stench. The person who's so high that they have to stumble to our altar. Because what our youth and young adults have sensed is that they've grown up in a church environment that says that it's loving, yet their words and actions say otherwise, right? It hurts me when I see people come into a church service or come around Christians, and because they're a little smelly or they're a little disheveled or they don't seem to have it all together mentally or whatever their situation may be, that we begin to treat them with a 10-foot pole, right? We don't want to really pray for or hug the person that's high out of their minds or who smells like alcohol or who has some kind of mental incapacity. It pains me. And people see that, right? Our young people, you talk about young people who are about a cause, our young people see that. They're saying, oh, okay, right, we love, right, we're Jesus followers and we love people, yet the very people that need our love and our help come through our doors and they walk out being rejected, right? So that's key number 2. As we go to the third bullet point, key number 3 is that we must be engaged with the needs of our community. Millennials see themselves as world changers. They value community. So young people are looking at the church and they're wanting to know, how are you invested in the community? How are you contributing to bettering the world? They've grown up in church learning about a Jesus who cares for the broken, the oppressed, the wounded, and the poor. Yet they tend to find a disconnect when they look around at a church that doesn't seem to show the same level of care and commitment to these disadvantaged groups as Jesus does in the Bible. Am I talking about being more concerned with feeding hungry people food rather than feeding them the Word of God? No. However, Jesus did both. Jesus met people's needs both physically and spiritually because he understood that before I can get anywhere with a person and explaining to them biblical truths, I must consider that they have some basic physical needs that if they're not met, they won't be able to listen a lick to anything spiritual that I have to say to them. A person with a growling, hungry stomach, a person who is worried about whether they have a place to lay their heads that night, they're likely not going to have an automatic inclination to get spiritual with you. And so I'm not saying that we have to go around and open up soup kitchens everywhere, right? But I am saying that God cares about people's needs. He has a track record of acknowledging and caring for the least of these in the world. And so we must make it a point to do the same. And we must understand that it's not always going to be effective to go straight to a Bible study with a person, right? We were just talking about that. Sometimes we have to address some physical and emotional needs first, just as Jesus did. And then we'll find that there's going to be that open door to meet their spiritual need as well. Young people have a desire to change the world around them, and they're looking around wondering if we as the church will do our part and rise into that occasion as well. Key number 4, we must incorporate sincerity into our evangelism. Our approach to evangelizing or sharing Christ with others can sometimes come across as disingenuous. Maybe it's due to our extravagant zeal. Sometimes it's due to us looking at people as a notch on our belt, right, or a prize to be won, instead of seeing them as precious souls. Right. However, we have to realize that sometimes we get into this tendency to try to win people with this aggressive sales pitch that feels greasy and demanding to people, right? It turns people off. When in actuality, we get further with people when we show them first that we actually care about them as people. There's a saying I mentioned earlier, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. People can sense when you're approaching them because you genuinely care about their well-being, about their eternity, about their souls, about their current situations, right? They can tell the difference between that and when you're approaching them just because you're interested in meeting a Bible study for the month. And so this generation has associated Christian evangelism so much with being in your face and all about the bottom line that they've wanted nothing to do with it. And so as a church, we must return to an evangelistic spirit that is driven by true compassion and sincerity. Key number 5. Now, I've only got a few more here as we're wrapping up. Key number 5, we have to get transparent. In connection with the fact that this generation wants to be real, they want to know that the saints and church leadership are actual real people. We come off so often as if we've got it all together, and it leaves people feeling as if we're either wearing masks or as if they can't relate to us because they've got real life problems, but we don't seem to struggle with anything. As Christians, as leaders, we must be willing to take down our guards and share more of ourselves. And we're going to get into that more in our next session. For those who decide to return, if you don't, I won't be offended. But some leaders, some of the leaders that have had the biggest and greatest impression on my life are the ones who are real. right? The ones who stumbled on their words sometimes when they spoke on the platform. The ones who, and I'm not telling anybody to go and, do their sermon and say, I'm going to stutter here. I'm going to make a mistake here on purpose because I'm real. That's not what I'm saying, but it's just nice to be able to see evidence that, okay, you're not perfect. You make mistakes too, right? Leaders who were willing to tell an embarrassing story about how they humiliated themselves, who were humble enough to admit when they were wrong, who were transparent enough to share about a time when they didn't make the right decision.
Right.
This is what our youth are looking for. Key number six, we must mentor our young people. And I feel like we've talked about this in great detail. And so we don't have to go much further, but our youth have become so accustomed to hearing all the things they're doing wrong and all the ways they don't live up to the standards of the previous generation, the church of old. It may seem that our young people are dead set on doing their own thing, but in actuality, they're desiring and they're in need of someone older, wiser, more experienced to lovingly take them under their wing. I hear stories all the time from my family, from those who are older, about how they had mentors, people who intentionally sold and invested into them, elders who shared their wisdom, people in church who showed an interest and gave training and guidance. I believe this is something we have lost in our time, but it's something that we desperately need to revive. Millennials aren't so set in doing things their own way and acting out of impulse. They just need someone older to lovingly show them the way. And we'll say #discipleship for that one. Amen. Key number 7, celebrate the good things that this generation is doing. It's human tendency to frown upon or reject things that we don't understand or that we're not familiar with. Again, our young people tend to feel criticized, but we must make sure they feel celebrated and uplifted. Granted, there are many things about this younger generation that older generations don't understand, right? The obsession with technology, the styles and clothing, the preferences in music. But despite those differences, we must recognize in the church that those differences aren't always a bad thing. For example, it's true that there are millennials, yes, who are uber involved in their cell phones and tablets. However, how about acknowledging those who are using this technology to glorify God? There are young people who use their social media pages as places to post scripture and to share encouraging messages. There are young people who use their tech skills to create the amazing promotional media that we use to promote our church and district events, right? And so we want to start making it a habit to embrace, uplift, and encourage the goodness that exists within their differences. And then I have 2 more keys. I know I don't think I have many bullet points, but these were 2 that came to mind that I feel like are really important. Key number 9, let's give less blind tradition and more of the why that they can connect to. And key number 9, the last one, we have to be willing. This is the one I'm most passionate about. I don't even have enough time to talk about it. We have to be willing to acknowledge current world issues. We just have to. We have to. I just, Lord have mercy. Millennials are inundated with information and news. This is also a generation that wants to make a difference, and they feel compelled to live their lives so that it matters, so that it counts for something. Combine those 2 traits, and what you have is a generation of young people who see all the things going on around in this world. And 1, they must formulate their own views on these topics, right? As we all have a responsibility to formulate our views. And 2, often they connect with some of these issues and they want to do something about it. However, the very topics that they're inundated with, the very matters that they're passionate about, the very issues that they're grappling with to try to create their own views about, are the very things that they typically find the church is not willing to talk about. Millennials are dissatisfied with the notion of church being a place of red tape, where discussion of cultural and global issues is considered to be taboo. They aren't interested in a church that seeks to be its own utopian bubble, not allowing the real hurts and everyday issues of the world to taint its little peaceful silo that is created. The church must be a place where people can bring their hard questions without fear of being shunned or silenced, where the topics of sex, drugs, racism, mental health, sexuality aren't treated as if they don't really exist, because we all know that they do. Or as if the body of Christ, right, we don't need to talk about these things because we're so spiritual, right? Because after all, Jesus paid it all, right? Jesus. Like I sometimes feel like we bring up these questions like, but Jesus, okay, but tell me more, right? And this is my last sentence here is that if the church is in a place where these conversations can be had in the context of the Word of God, with a loving, spirit-led environment where their views can be shaped by godly wisdom and biblical insight, if that doesn't happen, then we will simply find that alternatively, our young people will have their views formulated by the wrong influencers and the wrong sources of context.
Right.
Sometimes we think that we're doing ourselves a favor by saying, oh, let's not talk about that.
Right.
Well, really, we're just saying, we want to talk out here, so go out into the world so they can tell you what to think, right? We can't do it.
Amen.
We can't do it. And that's the end. I apologize for running short on time like that, but thank you guys. That was awesome.
Amen.